Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
ECSI fans, do you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all of your sports books and track all of your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You can also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as they're the best account on the platform. Head to the App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire to download the app.
Good evening, sports fans from all around the globe. I am your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is the Closing Bell with Ron Marmalefsky live from LA, our NCAA and NFL show for December 22nd, 2023. That's right, just 2 days till Christmas Eve, 3 to Christmas Day, and just 9 days left in 2023. Great to be back. Last week I was on the DL. The week before I was live in Boston for Army Navy Media Day, and Saturday on live at the game. But good friend and colleague Ron has anxiously awaited for me to get off the mat, and we're here. We've had a great week, and no way better way to end the week than right here with Ron, is we're going to break down some NCAA football, the bowls, and we were talking backstage, just the end of an era where the bowl seasons used to be. You know, you'd wake up New Year's Day all giddy, excited for some New Year's Day bowls, started by, of course, you know, the Rose Bowl parade and the Macy's parade, and then 5 o'clock the world stopped with Keith Jackson and the Rose Bowl, and then we always ended with Don Criqui at the Orange Bowl. And I can see Ron smiling right now. I'm smiling ear to ear. Those voices I still can remember, and I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, but bring me back to the 70s and 80s. God, those were the good old days. But we're here today. A lot to cover the last couple weeks, this week, and obviously into next week. So without further ado, the true star of this show, Mr. Ron himself.
Don Criqui, boy, that's a blast from a past. I haven't heard that name in a while. Glad to be back with you talking football. I have missed it the last couple weeks as well, so lots to cover.
There is just a bazillion ways to go here. Where to start? I'm going to start in college football. We just finished up a show with good friends Matt and Q, talking some college football. I talked about the 7, 8, 9 bowl games that are up tomorrow, and it's just like, you know, I'm excited maybe for James Madison and Air Force, but there's not much on that docket. But we haven't been on in a few weeks. So tell the viewers, the listeners, there is a boatload of them out there. The lead up to the announcement of these 40-something bowls, the opening numbers, and then you got to take into consideration opt-outs, transfer portal, coaches getting fired, coaches moving on to new jobs. How do you handle this?
Not as well as I used to, I would have to say. I am so used to having tremendous line value when the lines come out. I mean, 3, 4, 5, 6 points of line value, anticipating things. Last year, I was still able to do that, even though we saw more opt-outs than usual. But this year, I think I've had 5 games so far that I have negative line value, 2 that's passed and 3 that's coming up. And it just means, oh no, I have to hold back now, or I have to be ready. I have to anticipate things even faster when those initial bowl lines come out. It's exhausting to take care of that. But now that money is being thrown, whoever thought that people from the MAC conference or the Sun Belt conference, even their star players, would opt out of a bowl game, but they're being thrown money for the first time. You are allowed to give them $30,000, $40,000 more than that to join their team and to say, no, don't play in the bowl, don't risk injury, come out early. And then you have teams like Texas A&M coming up, Notre Dame, Oregon State, just North Carolina, you name it. We've had 30 different quarterbacks that I can count so far, starters that are not playing in bowl games. We've had 8 to 10 quarterbacks who have taken thrown maybe 10 passes starting bowl games. So when this is all done, I'm going to be exhausted.
I was talking about this. I don't know the gentleman's name, shame on me, but I saw on social media, was it 2 days ago on signing day? Leave it to Lane Kiffin, his new star, whatever position this gentleman played, pulled up in this silver Lamborghini and all decked out. And I'm just like, wow, it must be nice to have money there, Ron.
I'm glad you brought that point up, because coaches in bowl games are actually more interested, or they have to babysit their own players, make sure that they re-recruit their own players, and they have to do the signing bonus, the signing period while the bowl season is going on. They're actually spending more time in recruiting athletes than they are preparing for bowl games. And this year is just magnifying that like we've never seen before.
Before we start breaking down these games, before we started the show, I was on the phone with a good friend and colleague. And I believe in trusting and respecting the opening number. To me, that number's set there for a reason. And where I'm going with this, Ron, is Michigan and Alabama. People remember Michigan playing Iowa, and it was like watching paint dry. As soon as Michigan scored the first touchdown, the game was over because we knew Iowa was not going to score. They did not open up the playbook. They didn't show anything. It was just business as usual. Get the win, and then let's get ready for January 1st. On the contrary, Georgia-Alabama SEC championship game, where Georgia came in 29 straight wins, two-time defending champs, and Alabama fighting, knowing if they win, most likely they're in, and they did that. Well, Vegas opened up Michigan -2.5, and that number shot down all the way to 1. And now, because people remember SEC, Alabama, Nick Saban versus Harbaugh and the Big Ten. Well, that line is now creeped back to 2 and 2.5. Thoughts on that opening number? Was it the correct number? In my eyes, Vegas got what they wanted. Now we got the tug of war for the last week on which way this number's really going to go.
Alabama's, the name brand alone, first of all, if Alabama wasn't on the name of the jersey, they would never have gotten into the Final Four. The whole SEC, the whole conflict with ESPN, there is a little bit of merit to that, but without getting into that, Alabama didn't necessarily play its best football, but they were in a good situational spot against Georgia. And so now that they're in, there's no way the odds makers could have set a 3. They would have had a barrage of Alabama money. I think the back room must have been interesting in terms of how they set that opening number, because they had to know that Nick Saban money would come in. 4 weeks to prepare for an opponent. Michigan, not exactly the most entertaining team offensively. They just beat you up and wear you down until you're done. So they couldn't set a 3. By my power ratings, and I would guess by most people's power ratings, this number should clearly be over 3. Now, the question is, how much do you value Nick Saban's preparation? How much do you value the fact that one of Michigan's signature wins against Penn State, the quarterback did not even attempt a pass in the second half? They went 28 or 29 plays, no pass attempts in the second half, which to me is a slight lack of confidence against a very good Penn State defense, but they're going to face another good defense in Alabama. So by my power ratings, this line is way too low because we're waiting 4 weeks for the game and the chess match and everything else. The line's probably where it needs to be.
I'm trying, when I first saw the two games and the matchups, we gave out in the middle of October while Alabama was playing Arkansas. Alabama plus 2,000 at DraftKings. This was, I think, 2 weeks after the loss to Texas. I didn't get the 3,000 or the 4,000, whatever that number was, but we got plus 2,000. Very happy with it. So my quick study was like, Alabama's going to beat Michigan. Texas is going to beat Washington. You got the revenge game from week 4. Alabama will be about a 2-point favorite, maybe over Texas. Alabama wins the national title. And Jeff's a genius here at East Coast Sports Investors and Sports Map Radio. Now, the more and more I assess this, I think Michigan's going to beat Alabama. I haven't heard a word about that Washington team. Can you help us out on Washington, Texas?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, too, because I don't know what Washington has done wrong this year. But by the same token, this is a loaded Texas team as well. My power numbers have this right where it needs to be. I actually was a little surprised that the line was that high. I thought that Washington would get some love, but you're right. They're not getting a lot of love on a national scale. Texas is getting a lot more love than that. Maybe they're the quote unquote more public team. I don't know. There's a lot of things Washington does well, but if Quinn Ewers has the kind of game that he's capable of having, there's a little too much run pass balance at first glance for me with Texas. My initial lean would be Texas winning the game. I tend to go in rotational order when I'm handicapping the games, and I'm paying way too much time getting all these opt-outs correct and so on. So I still have about 15 games to go before I get to the Washington, Texas. But my initial read would be a Texas victory.
Listening to some of the so-called experts, they break this game down as simple as this. If Texas defense is allowed to put pressure on Penix Jr., Texas will prevail. If Texas does not get pressure on Penix Jr., then Washington not only is dangerous, has a real good opportunity of winning this game. And I'll backtrack where, I have said all along, I thought Oregon was the best team in the country. I thought Oregon, even after their loss at Washington, was still the best team in the country. And then they were 9-point favorites in the rematch for the Pac-12, winning in Oregon, and Washington still prevailed.
Sometimes just certain teams match up well against certain other teams. And that's why when we talked last, or when I talked on different shows, the correct play was Washington against Oregon. There's no way that those teams, when they played each other, were 10 points apart. So we don't have really good matchup analysis with Washington and Texas. But you mentioned the pass pressure. That's going to be interesting because Texas had a modest 32 defensive sacks this year, but Washington only allowed 11 sacks on their quarterback, partly because their quarterback senses the pressure really well and steps out of it. It's not necessarily the sacks that will determine the game, but how much pressure Texas gets on the opposing quarterback. But Washington does a very good job of protecting for him.
We will not be here next Friday because of the holiday season. We'll be back to dissect what happened in the semifinals and obviously your breakdown of the championship game. But I'm going to throw you Biff's Almanac to all the watchers and listeners, and there's a boatload of them. Give us the raw analysis, just off the top of your head. Who do you think is standing and will face each other in the championship game?
Yeah. This is where my simulations really come into play. Every year I get a program run on a computer program that nobody understands anymore, but I get it and I run it. First, I do my own analysis and then I run the simulation. Now, I cannot, unfortunately, run simulations for every game because of all the opt-outs. There's no way you can plug in a quarterback that's had one pass attempt and come up with an accurate simulation. I can simulate these two games, but I haven't so far. But if you ask me who would be standing, boy, I'm going to sidetrack that question a little bit. I hope it's not Alabama, because it would send a bad message to everybody saying that Florida State didn't deserve to get in. It was presumptuous of the committee, even though they would have been big underdogs, to believe that defense doesn't matter and that Florida State shouldn't have been in. So in my heart, I would be rooting for Alabama not to be there. I have a sense Washington's not going to win 2 in a row, but I don't have a sense with the other 3. So I'm going to say offhand, the Michigan-Alabama winner would be my slight choice for the title.
All right. Opt-outs, coaches, transfer portals, a bazillion games. Before we break down the next 2 weeks of games, maybe with a lean or two on some of the big ones that you're seeing with some value, what have you seen so far in the bowl games? I mean, we don't even have to talk about, obviously, South Florida and Syracuse, what a clunker that was. But what have you seen so far?
Well, it's interesting because like I said, I've run simulations, and the simulations and I, when we agree, it's really deadly. We've only agreed twice and been 2-0 with those, with Fresno and with Texas Tech. So I'm happy with that. But there weren't that many opt-outs, and I was able to do some good analysis the first 6 games, and it went pretty well. Interestingly enough, what I've seen the most is that these games have been incredibly high scoring. We talked at the beginning of September about the new rules and fewer plays and all that stuff. Well, these games, I have not had that much value on a lot of the straight bets I've made, but I've had 6 or 7 points of value in the 2 over-unders that I played, and I lost both of them easily. So it's kind of strange, the fact there's my value, but these games are going way over the total, and I certainly hope that they continue to go over the total, because I have a very good number again on the Georgia Tech game tonight, going over. Open 61, I'm over 62. I've seen 66s out there. But what I've seen so far is a lot of variability with the new players and the new quarterbacks that are out there. Some of them are shining, some of them are failing, but either way, they're leading to more red zone drives. When you have defensive opt-outs, it's tending to go a little bit more higher scoring than I thought. So that would be my first takeaway.
This weekend, next week, is there any leans that you could give out, or some games that you finding some value and edges on?
Yeah, there's a lot of if this, then that. If this quarterback plays, I like this. If this guy opt out, that's what happened with the Marshall game. In terms of UTSA without their quarterback. And then I said, okay, well, then I'm not going to play the game. And unfortunately, UTSA still stomped them, and I didn't have that. I like an unpopular side. I like Northern Illinois against Arkansas State. My simulation likes the other side, which really disappoints me, because I was going to make that a rare 4-star play on Northern Illinois. I still like it enough to make it probably about a 2.5 star, but I'm going to respect the simulation analysis. But I do like Northern Illinois to pull the upset. If the Air Force quarterback plays, again, I'm going to go against my simulation. I wish I could give you a agreement with my simulation. I've only run just Saturday's games. I have to prepare the next ones. But I like Air Force if they get their quarterback back against James Madison. You have to weigh certain factors. How much does the coaching staff want to be there? Syracuse certainly didn't want to be there last night. We knew that going in, but I thought Schrader would have a good game. Then he doesn't play. Then the line doesn't move. And I say, why isn't the line not moving? I mean, South Florida was the play without Schrader. So I was surprised at that. But I do like Air Force if their starting quarterback comes back. Larrier, I think is his name. He hasn't played for about 4 games. So that's one you have to watch. I'm also, here's one the simulation and I agree on, but people like the other side, but that's okay. I actually like Utah against Northwestern. And the reason why I like Utah is because I think as great a year Northwestern has had, and boy, they had an unbelievable year. Coach of the year candidate, certainly coach of the year in the Big Ten, makes a lot of sense to me. Their stats sheet is still not that great. And even accounting for a couple of the opt-outs, as long as Utah quarterback Barnes is playing, and I assume he's playing, I think there are all systems going that he is playing. Utah remembers the last time they played Northwestern. Everybody's harping on the fact that Utah has not won a bowl game recently, but they had something like a 7 or an 8 game bowl winning streak, led Northwestern 20-3 at the half about 6 years ago. And Northwestern, unbelievable game in the second half. They outscored Utah 28-0. I think Utah has the better talent, and I'm willing to lay the points in that. So those are the 3 games off the top of my head for the next day or two that I'm looking at.
Well, obviously, we could talk for hours just on college, but there's another football for the NFL here, and it's been a couple weeks since you and I have talked NFL. If I remember correctly, last time we talked, that was, I think, San Fran getting ready to travel to Philly, and we had talked about Philly potentially with a 2-game losing streak, San Fran and Philly, and then Philly having to travel to Dallas. And then they compounded Philadelphia with a shocking loss, not to Geno Smith, not to Russell Wilson, but Drew Lock and the Seattle Seahawks, stunning them on Thursday. Now 3 losses in a row. Dallas, man, they look great at home, averaging over 40 points a game at home. Put them outside, and it didn't matter if the 85 Bears, I think, went to Buffalo last Sunday. No one was beating Buffalo, and it's just amazing. They finally decided, hey, we got a running back here named James Cook. We can actually run the ball. And I think Josh Allen threw the ball 15 times. There's some huge, huge matchups. Take us back the last couple weeks since we talked and what your eyes are seeing at the top and what's going on in the NFL.
You know, one of the mistakes I think even sharp handicappers make is analyzing data in a vacuum and not considering the outside noise, the other circumstances. There's a place for hard numbers, but there's also a place for some soft analysis. It's not who you play, but when you play them. And that's happened to Kansas City when they lost a couple of games. We're now in the midst of Kansas City this week. It'll be the 5th straight week that the opposing team has had a rest differential advantage. They get everybody's best shot as it is. And now they play with 6 days rest. The other team plays with 14 days rest or 10 days versus 7. Philadelphia was in one of those situations where it wasn't, schedule-wise, they were in a bad spot against Dallas. They were in a bad spot last week, I thought, against Seattle. Buffalo was in a tremendous spot. Detroit, who had faltered a little bit, was in a tremendous spot. One of the best spots I've seen in the last decade when they played Denver. So I think the most important lesson to be taught right now, it's not just who you play, but when you play them. And with the Josh Allen throwing 15 passes, kind of what I was calling for all along, keep Josh Allen from being a gunslinger, use James Cook, who had such a tremendous yards per carry average at Georgia, and you complete 7 passes and you win easily. You know, what a great recipe for the team and for Buffalo. And that was a really good situation for them. It's a neutral situation now moving forward to them, but that's kind of what you look for. And that's what I saw with a lot of the games the last couple of weeks. When these matchups took place was a deciding factor in the readiness and the preparation for these teams.
I mean, I always talk about people remember what they saw last, and everyone is short memory. And the Dallas team who got fat at home. I think their one game on the road was at Carolina in between, I don't know, 4 or 5 games at home. Traveled to to Buffalo, get steamrolled. Now they face a Miami team at home where on Monday I was all in on Dallas. I'm like, what a perfect spot. Oh my God. And the more I think about this, the whole world's on Dallas this week. The line opened up Miami 1.5. The whole world's on Dallas. It's not moving. And if they wanted the Miami money, they would have opened up Dallas 2.5 on the road, and then they would have got the Miami money. Ravens travel to San Francisco. Now, this could be a Super Bowl preview people are talking about. The 49ers, since the bye week, forget about it. They're the team to beat. We know that. But are people really looking at what next week is all about? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Dolphins travel to the Ravens next week, and that game will decide most likely the number 1 seed in the AFC.
Yeah, you're right. The Dolphins travel there. I said this a couple of hours ago, and this is part of my handicapping. The bigger the game, the less likely I'm going to be involved in it. I think Dallas and Miami is an unbelievably fascinating game because it's two teams that have beat up on inferior competition. Now they get to see if one of them can win by margin against each other. Two legitimate playoff teams, but they haven't had too many signature wins, if any, against teams that are at their weight class. And then you have that fascinating matchup, Baltimore and San Francisco. Monday night, San Francisco's excelled on Monday night. Baltimore's done absolutely nothing wrong. Deep roster. We all know that for years and years of great drafting. Lamar Jackson has stayed healthy. The running back situation got a little weaker, unfortunately, because of the knee injury to Mitchell. But the team has a lot of playmakers on defense, and they're really adapting now to the new offensive coordinator. So I look at these games and I say, have at it, have a great game, fantastic, do whatever you can, give 110%, but what's your mindset going to be the next week? What's going to happen to Dallas after this game? What's going to happen to San Francisco on a short week after this game? This is me wearing the fan hat watching these two teams and these two games. I don't have an edge in the particular games, but I think these are clearly four of my best power rated teams. And I'm fascinated to see how they play against each other.
And for the Dolphins, by the way, host Dallas this week, travel to Baltimore the following week, and then they get to end the season at home versus the Buffalo Bills, which if they lose to Dallas and if they lose to the Ravens and Buffalo wins this week and next week, which they have the Chargers this week, and I think they have the Patriots the following week. My point is that last game in South Beach, Miami and Buffalo, will be for the AFC East division as well.
It's incredible how this is shaping up. We've got a lot of games. We've got mediocre teams in the Indy, Jacksonville, Houston division. We've got Tampa Bay and Atlanta, New Orleans, and the NFC South division. We might have Detroit and Minnie fighting for a playoff spot. Seattle. We're going to have a lot of meaningful Week 18 games this year. So it's going to be something to watch.
I'm looking at today's schedule, and it's kind of comical because Christmas Day has been the NBA. That's their 5 games. That's their day to shine. And NFL said, not so fast. 2 games tomorrow, Cincinnati at Pittsburgh, which no Joe Burrow. Jake Browning's been great. We'll get into him. And then Buffalo and the Chargers. Buffalo now up to 12.5 against Easton Stick or whatever, God bless his name, a Charger team that fires the coach. This used to be an autoplay, by the way. Fire the coach, bet on the team the next week. Well, if you Venmo'd me $100 this week, Ron, to bet on the Chargers, I'd Venmo you 200 back and tell you to take the lovely bride out for dinner. I can't do it. Then you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games on Christmas Eve, and the last game at 8:15, my Patriots at Denver. And then on Monday night, 3 more games. You talk about rest, you talk about scheduling. Off the top of your head, is there any one of or two of these teams that stand out with an advantage coming into this week?
Well, I believe that Las Vegas has an advantage. Again, they have the 10 days. And once again, Kansas City is going to be facing a team without that rest differential that they need. So I like the way the Raiders are trying under Antonio Pierce. I like their defensive mindset. They're going to have to get out of harm's way. I mean, it's not like Vegas is as good a team as Kansas City. It's more the situation. But I think Vegas, at least coming in, has that rest advantage. I really don't like to endorse Tennessee, but they are facing a Seattle team off a last second victory with a short week. So you'd say if Tennessee can't get it done, something's wrong with Tennessee against Seattle. But then I'm not endorsing Tennessee because they'll probably find a way not to get it done. But your question was, do some teams or two teams have a rest advantage or a situational advantage? And I think both Seattle and Kansas City have that extra hurdle.
We have our good buddy, Mr. Anchors Away, Mr. Sailor in the house. He's talking about Go Colts and 100% transparency. I can't believe what's going on in Indy. I can't believe what's going on, obviously, in Houston. It's funny because they were printing tickets, Ron. We'll go back to August, and before the start of the year, people thought everyone was crazy if you didn't have a Jacksonville to win the division. I mean, it was free money. I mean, how dare you not tie up your money? I mean, this is the slam dunk of all slam dunk. Now you got Jacksonville, Indy, who lost their quarterback early, who lost Jonathan Taylor early. In comes Gardner Minshew to the rescue. And a Texans team where I think we both agree Coach of the Year is coming from the Texans. Can you explain, and with Russell obviously in the house, how is Indy doing this?
First of all, I've made a lot of Tuesday live bets, and I bet a lot of in season more than ever this year, and I'm very pleased with them. But I am one of those people, Jeff, that has a Jacksonville division ticket that I made sometime week 3 or 4. So I'm sweating that out too, and probably hedging some of it on Indy. As far as Indy's concerned, maybe Frank Wright wasn't that great a coach because. And then he graded out at the beginning of the year with the softest AFC schedule and one of the 5 schedules that were the easiest in the NFL. And that hasn't changed. I mean, they do play all these games against the NFC South and their own division. And they're playing a lot of games against suspect or rookie or injured quarterbacks. So Indy has that going for them. But contrary to teams like Atlanta and New Orleans and others, they're taking care of business when that happens. And some of these other teams aren't. It's one thing to face that schedule. It's another thing to win with that schedule. They've had a lot of different running backs. It turns out that Moss was just as good as Taylor in terms of yards per carry. So that's not an issue. Getting Pittman back this week will be a blessing. You know, you can't automatically say Indy's going to win against Atlanta, but I don't really understand the line movement. One of the things I did on Tuesday is I bet the over in the Indianapolis-Atlanta game because I think Atlanta is more inclined to open up their offense with Taylor Heineke as opposed to Desmond Ridder. They're more run-centric to begin with. So I'd rather take my chances on the over-under than the straight. But if Indy wins this game, they really position themselves not just to make the wild card, but maybe even to unseat Jacksonville for the division.
which is crazy. And I've seen Russell and a lot of people talk about this all week. A game now where Atlanta is favored by 2.5, and it's a true head scratcher. Must win, obviously, for Atlanta. Quarterback change from Ritter to Heineke. The weapons are there. They just, I think the OC has been awful the way they've used Bijan. We know how they used Pitts the last couple of years. You still got a star on the outside with Drake London, but again, the three-headed monster of Algier, Cordarrelle Patterson, and Bijan. It's like you spent a high draft pick on Bijan, and they're almost afraid to use him, Ron.
That's true. At this point, you take the reins off. The way the Lions used Gibbs, for example, the running back, everybody was, I mean, people were literally screaming at me, how come they're not using Gibbs the first 4 or 5 weeks? College players, they're not used to a 17, 18 game season, so on and so forth. I thought the use of Gibbs the first month was exceptional. And I would say the same thing for Robinson. But now, in do or die situations, these last 2-3 weeks, every game with Atlanta tends to be close. Why aren't you unleashing your best weapon offensively in terms of teaming him with London, teaming him with Pitts to make it work? I think they should use him more. There's no more tomorrow for Atlanta, but this is one of the coaches that just shouldn't have a job in 2024. I'm sorry to say this, but he doesn't move the needle. He's not a 2020s type of coach that delivers an offensive scheme that has run pass balance. If you prefer to run on first down and you run on second down, you end up with a 6-8 record.
Ron, I'm going to keep you right there on that spot, and I'm going to give you are the GM of the Atlanta Falcons. You want to cut the coach? I'm going to allow you to cut the coach, but what I have heard the last few weeks makes too much sense. We know Chicago right now has the number 1 pick. They own it from the Panthers, though. If the Panthers win one more game and the Patriots lose out, I think the Patriots move to the 1 spot. But I'm going to play the game. Chicago ends up with the 1 pick and the 5 pick, and they've decided they're going to go Caleb Williams. And Justin Fields is available. Justin, homegrown, bred from Atlanta, did start with Georgia till he went to Ohio State. You're the GM. You just fired the coach. Are you going to make a move and bring Justin Fields in?
Well, this is going to seem contradictory, but if I'm firing the coach, I'm not bringing Justin Fields in. Justin Fields is probably a better fit with the current coach than he would be with the next coach because of his ability to escape the pocket and run that particular system better than a Desmond Ritter can run and escape the system. So no, I would rather have a more traditional passer with elusiveness. I want, not that you're going to get Joe Burrow, but a Joe Burrow type who can evade pressure, runs only when he has to, but shoots the ball downfield, uses London, uses Pitts. I don't think Justin Fields to me does not throw on rhythm. I want somebody who throws on rhythm to get London and Pitts in the best situation possible. So I'm not taking Fields.
Going to go down a couple games here. One of the more intriguing ones, again, another head scratcher, but I think I understand why. Jacksonville travels to Tampa Bay. Original line, Jacksonville -2.5. Now Tampa -2.5. Initially, red flag, bells go off. That means, in my eyes, they're not expecting Trevor Lawrence, obviously, to play. He's concussed right now. Baker Mayfield. I know DeMar Hamlin's supposed to get the comeback player of the year. I know there's a bunch of other candidates. I must admit when I'm wrong. What a year of Baker Mayfield. I thought Tampa would be irrelevant. He's had some clunkers, but for the most part, had a very, very good year and just boxed the wire, looked like a champ last week in Lambeau Field, defeating the Packers. Now comes home, and I've been in this spot before where Baker is the man. He is coming off one of his best games of his life, and now he's 2.5-point favorites. No Trevor Lawrence. We expect them to do what they did last week. Am I crazy?
No, no. I mean, this is the most fascinating game on the board in terms of both teams need this game so badly in order to get. I mean, there's only going to be one team going from Tampa's division, so you have to win the division. You have to win every game you can, and they have New Orleans on deck. If they win this and beat New Orleans, maybe the race is over. I don't know all the tiebreaker situations offhand. Jacksonville has to keep pace with Indianapolis, and the way Houston's pulling games out at the last second, they've got to just focus on themselves. I speculated with Tampa. I didn't get points with the look ahead, but I speculated with Tampa at even money, figuring the worst that would happen is the line would go back down to even money. It was sitting 1 minus 105 and even money and stuff like that. If Lawrence doesn't play, it's great value. And I'm with you. I did not expect a big year from Tampa. One more Tampa win, and I will lose my season over/under prediction on Tampa. So it's one of those teams that I misjudged the leadership and the experience, and I think Baker's having a marvelous year. But to be honest, these teams, you could probably play it 50 times, and each team would win 25 if the game was at Tampa. So I'm not necessarily proud of having Tampa even. It's a speculation play, hoping that the game is close and I could have both sides on it. Let's see if Lawrence goes. He was rumored to be practicing today. I think he's questionable for the game. When you're questionable, you're generally 75% likely to play. But if he's not cleared of concussion protocol, that's a different story.
Russell wants to know, are the Colts going to get Belichick, Tomlin, and Smith fired?
I think Tomlin still calls the shots. You're looking at a coach that has overachieved with he tried to transition this offensive line over the last 2-3 years. And remember, Big Ben's last 2 years, he had zero time to throw. They had a poor offensive coordinator who they finally fired. They have prima donnas, guys who aren't running the right routes at wide receiver. They're a little bit slow at running back, although Warren's catching on and his yards per carry is pretty good. I think what you'll see instead is that Tomlin changes his stripes. He's done it before. Defensively, he said about 6 years ago, we have to start playing more in-your-face defense. And he changed that defensive scheme around completely. I think you're going to see the same thing. Tomlin stays. He hires a different offensive coordinator, and he completely changes the offensive scheme. That's what I think will happen. I have no idea what's going to happen with Belichick. No idea.
Staying with Tomlin for a second, again, there's no team in the world that believes in their coaching staffs. They don't flip coaches. The same with the homebred players. Pickett didn't have a good first year, obviously, had a great preseason, and I almost wanted to anoint him as, here we go. This is the second coming of Ben. It has not been a good year for Pickett. Watching the last month, watching the antics on the field from Deontay Johnson, not blocking, not trying to get a fumble. The same with George Pickens, who I loved, and now I wouldn't want him on my team. It's almost like, has Tomlin lost the locker room, or are these two just acting out and they're cuttable? I mean, I don't know what to say there.
There's a wide receiver gene that goes around where one out of every 3 wide receivers is a me guy in the league. We've seen it it just happens that we've had a couple of them on Pittsburgh. If I were Pittsburgh, if I were Tomlin, people believe in him. They want to play for him and so on. I'd go to TJ Watt and say, get in these wide receiver faces and you're respected. You're TJ Watt. You're one of the best defensive players on the planet. Tell them what you're going to do to them if they get out of line. I'd literally, make TJ Watt the face of the franchise to get them in better stead. I think things are going to turn around in Pittsburgh, not necessarily this year, but down the road, if they make some drastic changes offensively.
Looking down the board, we talked a little about the Baltimore-San Francisco game. Not a lot of great games. We talked Dallas-Miami already. Tomorrow, really nothing to talk about. Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. I thought that number was a little odd. Cincinnati 2.5. It's at 3 right now at South Point and DraftKings, 2.5 at the Circa and most other books. Obviously, Pittsburgh loses. They're done. They're on life support. Any slight lean there? Does that number smell to you, or do you respect the fact that even without Joe Burrow, Cincinnati is 2.5-point favorites at Pittsburgh?
Yeah, based on going to Mason Rudolph, I think the line has to be 3. Because if Mason Rudolph was the answer, why haven't they inserted him in the lineup any of the last 4 years? I mean, he's sitting on the roster and they've been so reluctant to use them. I think that tells somewhat of a story. I have a good situation for Pittsburgh. I have a great situation for Cincinnati. So I can't have a lean on the game because I have conflicting situations where I kind of like both sides. I want to say one more thing about Kenny Pickett as well. Unfortunately, injuries have stunted his growth. I think he would have progressed well enough. He's a separator compared to Mitchell Trubisky and Mason Rudolph. I mean, they've got to bank on him in the future. But one of the things I wrote about this week is that we have to get back to the fact that backup quarterbacks in this league are as valuable as almost any other position other than starting quarterback. You have to have a backup quarterback. We are now on the 56th starting quarterback this week in the NFL. We're probably going to pass 60 by the end of the year, either because it's week 18 and people rest, or we have a situation brewing with the New York Jets. They're going to add another quarterback to the mix because I think Zach Wilson was declared out. You have to have a good backup quarterback. And without Kenny Pickett, that's what's hurt Pittsburgh more than anything. I don't have a lean on this game.
I'm going to stay in that division for a second with you. Deshaun Watson, DTR, PJ Walker. None of them playing. In comes Joe Flacco, who 3 weeks ago was raking leaves. and you and I both know, and everyone watching and listening that sticks with us understand, defenses do travel. We know Cleveland's got one of the best defenses in the league. In comes Joe Flacco to the rescue. Shocked at his play?
You know what I realize is that because he's seen it all, he's been around, he doesn't get flustered, he's very calm, cool, and collected. And I think that's a tremendous asset to have, especially when you don't get to play a lot and then you're inserted into the lineup. I like him from that standpoint. I like the fact that just because he's older, whatever he is, 36, 37, 38, he's got a lot of mileage left because he has not had a starting job for the last few years. But if you really look at the numbers, he has thrown 5 interceptions in 3 games. So timing is off. There's a reason why he lost the starting quarterback job a few years ago. I don't know what the future is in Cleveland. I don't even know if Deshaun Watson is the future in Cleveland because, boy, he looks a tick slow in the pocket. He was very slow to recognize things. He was starting to get his mojo back a little bit. Then he gets hurt. Now he's going to have another 11 months without taking a meaningful snap. It's a crazy time in Pittsburgh and Cleveland, and they have to rely so much on their defense. Another toss-up game, an important game in this one against Houston. But and I think DeMeco Ryans, another guy like Antonio Pierce in Vegas, defensive coaches who are really get a lot out of their defenses, they may throw some things at Joe Flacco that make it interesting.
And staying with Houston and DeMeco, no C.J. Stroud last week, no Nico Collins, no Tank Dell, insert Noah Brown. And the shocker, because everyone thought they were going to the backup and from Stanford, and he said, not so fast. We got Case Keenum, played a real tough first half, but rallied the troops not only to come back and tie the game, but to win the game. I'm just shocked. Houston again. We knew they were moving in the right direction. C.J. Stroud, when healthy, I feel bad for the rest of the quarterbacks that were drafted because you look at a Bryce Young and the Panthers going to be saying, Jesus, how come Bryce? What's going on? CJ's doing it. What's going on here? But to lose CJ, to lose Tank, to lose Nico, Damian Pierce has been a bust this year, but this team just keeps on winning.
Yeah, the combination of Pierce and Singletary, and I think running backs are interchangeable to begin with. So you just go with a hot hand there and hope you could get close to 4 yards per carry and let the passing game, which is what the NFL is mostly about until it comes to playoff time, do their job. I believe Nico Collins will be back this week. If I'm correct, CJ Stroud will not be back. So again, it's Houston will rely on his defense. I think that's where the game will be won or lost. Houston's doing it a little bit with smoke and mirrors. They've won some games that they could have lost. They have a lot of toss-up games, including last week's game, which was one that could have been easily in the L column. I saw D'Amico Ryans, who doesn't smile all that much, smile after that game. I think he stole one there. But that's the mark of a team that's emerging. Complete buy-in from everybody who's playing for him, and they're getting the most out of their team.
Russell asked a question. Is Puka live for, it looks like, OPOY, Offensive Player of the Year, with Stroud falling off here at the end?
It's possible. Let's say Houston doesn't make the playoffs and the Rams do make the playoffs. Then you have a case for Puka. And I tell you, he was on our show. We got Ted Sobel when he got a live interview with Puka, and we heard his enthusiasm. This was around week 3, week 4, week 5, when he was still an unknown, but putting up major numbers. You could see how much enthusiasm he had for playing and how excited he was and how humble he was. Just somebody who's really grounded as a rookie with all these rookie wide receivers, the top 4, and he having maybe 500 or 600 yards more than any of them. Great year for Puka, but we have to see what happens to Houston and the Rams down the stretch.
Yes, Russell, he said Offensive Rookie of the Year, not Player of the Year. And it's funny, in my one big swing for $250,000, we started the year against 4,800 teams. We got into the top 917. We started the 3-week sprint at 364. Our one player going last night was Puka, 33 points. We've cracked into the top 100. We're about 60 off the lid with this week and next week. First prize, 250 large. Russell, Ron, I guarantee you this. If I happen to win this, we'll be meeting in Vegas and dinner will be on me. So don't you guys worry about that one.
All right.
It's funny. We were talking about the Houston. Houston opened up 1.5-point favorites. And there is now a flip. 2.5-point favorites. Flacco and the Browns are favored, and 3 right now at South Point. Jimmy Vaccaro, Chris Andrews has now made Cleveland a 3-point favorite on the road against Houston, and that number tells me right away that CJ Stroud will not be there.
Yeah, it tells me that too, but I generally, in toss-up games, I would say 4 out of every 5 times there's a toss-up game and I can get 3 points, I would probably take 3 points. So the only side, if it was a natural 3 at a majority of places, the only side I would look is Houston, because I don't want to lay points with 3. I don't want to lay 3 points with Cleveland right now. I don't think they're that complete of a team.
Last question. I've worked you overtime. Make sure you tell the wife I apologize, but we're working a little overtime. We got to close. Ravens, Baltimore. Again, San Fran, let's go to your power rankings right now. Your top 5 in the NFL, Ron, is?
San Francisco number 1, and it's not even close anymore. And after that, you could put a whole bunch of teams in there. Believe it or not, Buffalo is in the top 5 there. Dallas is in the top 5. Baltimore is in the top 5. Philadelphia is long gone. During our vacation part, they dropped to 7, 8 kind of there. So I have those 3, Dallas and Miami. So I have a top 6. And I think Dallas and Miami joined Buffalo. Hopefully I haven't forgotten anybody. Baltimore are in there. And then there's a drop off after that.
Are we buying stock? I know we missed it a week late. Obviously, you needed to buy the stock before Buffalo beat Dallas. Good time to buy stock on Buffalo, playing the Chargers this week. I think it's the Patriots the following week, and then a matchup in South Beach. I know the Ravens most likely maybe will get the number one seed. The Chiefs, who you and I haven't talked much about, really struggling right now. And then, of course, you got Miami. And then, so is it time to jump in on the Bills?
Well, I'm probably not, because I want to see a healthier defense, especially on the pass rush to help protect their secondary. But I will say this: nobody wants to play Buffalo in the playoffs. They would prefer that other teams make the playoffs and Buffalo sit on the sidelines. And Buffalo's going to have to continue to bring their A game. They have to keep Josh Allen out of harm's way. We talked about it. Cook is a valuable option. Josh Allen talked about having him and being able to have him carry the ball so that they're not passing as much. That's something I've advocated for the whole season. Nobody wants to play Buffalo once in the playoffs, but I'm not necessarily buying stock in them anyway.
Russell wants to know, if you don't mind, and I'll make sure I'm saying this correctly, offensive player of the year. Any value taking Lamar at 100-1 or Purdy at 75-1? Maybe CMC wins a MVP and a QB gets offensive player of the year? ?
Yeah, it's usually the other way around, isn't it? It's usually the MVP goes to a quarterback, and the offensive player of the year, which I looked it up because either Russell or somebody else asked me a question about that. The offensive player of the year tends to go 50-50 or a little bit more to a non-quarterback. So we could have it flipped where we still have Brock Purdy or Lamar Jackson. Maybe whoever looks better on Monday night be the favorite. There's only 4 people, in my opinion, for MVP that are in the race right now: Purdy, McCaffrey, Tua, who would still be in the race if Miami ran the table, and then Lamar Jackson. So if you believe offensive MVP if you believe MVP goes to a quarterback, then McCaffrey is the legitimate favorite to win the offensive player of the year. But there's a lot of buzz lately, finally, for McCaffrey at least being in serious contention for MVP. So you're talking about 100-1 or 75-1. Of course, that's tremendous value, in my opinion. Are they likely to win it? Maybe not, but 100-1 or 75-1, that just seems like an awful lot.
If Tyreek gets to 2,000 yards, no chance at either one of those awards?
I have a feeling there's more love for McCaffrey because he blocks, he catches passes, and he runs the ball. And Tyreek, for what he does, he may be the best at it, but he's also a product of the system where Tua throws those Kenny Stabler-like left-handed slant passes, and Tyreek catches it in stride and outruns everybody on the planet. So it's a great situation for Tyreek, taking nothing away from his performance. But I would think that McCaffrey would be the non-quarterback that carries more value with the voters.
Well, I've kept you here for an hour. God bless you. But as always, I like to give you that nice 7-yard button hook, and the stage is yours for any potential closing thoughts on Christmas weekend.
First of all, Merry Christmas to everybody, and Happy New Year. If I don't get a chance to wish people on various shows Happy New Year, take it easy, enjoy the family, and so on. One college thought, I learned the lesson at the beginning of this bowl season. We talked about it. Don't be afraid to wait on making some of these bowl bets in games that are not, let's say, the Final Four, because you have to wait. There might be one player who decides, no, in the end, I'm not really going to play. They are allowed to practice with the team, and they're taking every advantage by staying in shape with practicing with the team. But you are going to see another 5 to 7 players, important players, opt out between now and the end of the year. It could be on Mississippi. It could be on Ohio State. I know Harrison hasn't announced, but I'd be surprised if he plays. So you're going to see some line movement. Be careful about that. My NFL parting shot is 7-7, 6-8 teams are 7-7 and 6-8 for a reason. So when you do your handicapping in week 17 next week and you say, oh, they must win the game. If they're 7-8, or even if they're 8-7, if it's such a must win, well, they've lost 7 or 8 games already. They're still vulnerable to win. Be scared about automatically thinking just because it's a must win that they are going to win.
Bill Krakenberg talked about that this week. He talks about those must wins. And if I had 10 cents from 1975, the year I had my first wager in 5th grade, to 2023, and let's just say 40 plus years later, I'd be living at the Bellagio at the presidential suite right now because I'd be a rich man, Mr. Ron.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Ron, closing here. Thank you so much. Tell everyone where they can find all your fine work, website, podcasts with Chris, articles, Wager Talk.
Well, first, with the bowl articles that I'm doing on Wager Talk, it's got to be a disclaimer because I write them about 6 to 7 days in advance of when they come out. So I'm trying to write the next ones where I say, if this, then that, and maybe give out some player recommendations, because I'm just not going to be able to have as many team or game recommendations as I have in the past, because it's a crazy year. We're seeing the beginning of the end of that easier handicapping analysis for the bowl season. But you can find articles on Wager Talk. I'll still have some NFL articles coming out every Tuesday. Chris and I will try to do a Tuesday show next week. I'm not sure about the status of any other shows after Tuesday this coming week, but like we talked about backstage, every once in a while when it gets to January, February, March, we'll talk about quarterbacks, we'll talk about the draft, we'll talk about new coaches, some opinions on that. I'm only a football guy, so I like to talk football.
An amazing wrap up to the holiday season. Shout out to Mr. Russell Saylor, everyone else watching here. Great way as always to end our Fridays and our week. I can't thank you enough. To everyone else, myself and Riley Magnuson will be back tomorrow morning at some point. We're going to break down some games on Saturday, talk some Sunday and Monday. Last show before the holidays. Be back at them on Tuesday. To Ron, Merry Christmas to you, your family, and we'll be off next Friday. So Happy New Year, and obviously we'll be ready the following Friday to talk the finals in the national championship game, and of course NFL Week 18 / get ready for playoffs.
Thank you again.
To myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, the one, the only Mr. Ron at Ron A Sports. We wish everyone a blessed evening. Have a great weekend. Remember, guys, to have some fun here. Stay in your lanes. There's always tomorrow. And if it looks real good, it looks real good for a reason. Maybe pump the brakes and think twice. So take care. Have a great night, and we will see you soon.